What's up guys, it's James out on the Out-of-State Investor, and in today's video I'm going to take some time to address Ryan Pineda's recent video called Cash Flow is Dumb. Yes, you heard that right, and I'm going to tell you as an investor myself, someone who buys rental properties and flips houses, what I think about his perspective and whether or not I think Ryan's right or if Ryan's just completely lost his mind. So with that said, let's jump into it. Alright, so as I start this video, I want to just say first and foremost that Ryan is an amazing entrepreneur, killer real estate investor, and even though I'm going to disagree with him in certain aspects in this video, I still have a lot of respect for the guy and he's the real deal. Now, one of the first things he talks about in his video is how he didn't want to choose rental property investing to start off.
I honestly had no ambition to buy a rental property. For me, it was far better to flip every single property and build up cash because I didn't have any cash. If I were to take, say, $20,000 and put in a rental property, that's not good for me because now that $20,000 is stuck and I'm pretty much gonna have to figure out how to make another $20,000 doing something else.
You see, he didn't want to have $20,000 of his money just stuck in a rental property that he can't just pull out, redeploy, and buy a bunch of more rental properties with that. Instead, he wanted to do a house flipping route. He wanted to build his house flipping business, and with all that capital, then he could start buying rental properties after that. So with that said, my first response to that is that you don't have to have your capital stuck in a rental property. You see, you have strategies like the BRRRR strategy, stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And with that strategy, you're just basically buying a fixer-upper house, you're adding value to it by rehabbing it, and then you're renting it out, refinancing it to pull your initial capital back out, and then you're redeploying it on buying more rental properties so that you can scale your business. In fact, I even have a video I did on this topic about my first BRRRR deal I ever purchased, and it was from out of state. And I managed to get all my initial capital back and then some, essentially getting paid for having the rental property. And so it just goes to show you that you don't need to leave your capital stuck in a rental property. Now, the second thing to consider, especially if you're in a high income bracket, is that the profits you make from the flips are going to be taxed as ordinary income. So they're essentially under the capital gains tax umbrella. Now, on the flip side, with rental properties, the IRS created a tax code that totally benefits the landlord, and it's very easy to write off all your income so that the cash flow you make ends up becoming a net number to you. And third and most importantly is house flipping is a difficult way to get started for the average real estate investor, someone who has limited knowledge, limited money, and no experience under their belt. And I could tell you firsthand that I was that average guy when I got started in real estate, and if I would have started my first deal as a house flip, I would have no doubt lost my shirt and I would have ended my career just as soon as I started it. So in order to flip a house, you're going to need a lot of capital, and that capital is going to need to either come from yourself, from a private money lender, from a hard money lender, or if you want to get super creative with it, you could do seller financing. But in most situations, you're going to need enough capital to buy a house in cash, to cover your closing costs and inspections, to cover all your holding costs like your interest rates and things like that. And then in addition to that, you're going to need to cover all your rehab costs. So it can really add up to a lot of capital when you break it down. Not to mention that if you've never done a rehab before and you've never worked with a contractor before, then you're taking on extra risk, because if you have like a private money loan or a hard money loan, then the longer that project takes, the more profit is getting taken away by every month longer you hold onto the property. Now look, it definitely worked out for Ryan, so I'm not trying to take anything away from him or saying he's wrong in any way, but what I am trying to say is that even Ryan will admit he took on a lot of risk by maxing out his credit cards, and so not everybody's going to come out on top like he did when they're taking on that much risk on their first real estate deal. For instance, there's a YouTuber called Spencer Cornelia, and this guy with his limited experience in real estate decided to do 2 out-of-state fix and flips with hard money loans. And let me tell you that, long story short, he ended up losing $60,000 of his own money, and that put him in a really tough spot. So not everybody ends up coming out on top the same way that Ryan did. Now for me, I ended up taking the more conservative route because I didn't have a high income at the time and I didn't want to take on too much risk. So with that said, I bought a single family house out of state that I used as a rental property, and it cost me less than $20,000 out of pocket, and that covered my down payment and my closing costs. And with that, 1 year later, I ended up tripling my money without even doing any rehab to it. And the reason I was able to see this kind of appreciation in such a short amount of time is I was able to identify one of the best up and coming areas in the Atlanta metro area that was seeing tons of gentrification. So anyway, I have all the details in a video I actually did about that deal. If you want to check it out, link above and below in the description. So next, Ryan talks about his experience in the cheaper markets out of state, and he talks about a triplex he bought for $12,000, put $12,000 into it, so he's essentially $24,000 all in, and then that ended up renting out for $1,200 a month, which sounds like a really good deal. But what he found is that even though it looked like a good deal on paper, in reality it turned out to not really be so good of a deal after all.
And I held those rentals for years, but after just experiencing it and seeing what the real cash flow was and what the headaches were, I just decided it wasn't worth it anymore, and I sold them all.
So my thoughts on this as an out-of-state investor is I actually completely agree with Ryan. You see, number one, there is a huge difference between cash flow on paper and cash flow in reality. And what I'm finding is that a lot of these people that start learning on Bigger Pockets, they learn how to calculate their cash flow and adjust for 5% on vacancy, 5% on their maintenance, 5% on their capital expenditures, whatever it is, it's not very accurate when it comes to some of these cheaper markets. For instance, if you had a property that was renting out for $700 a month, and let's assume that the roof needed replacing. Now in my market, that would end up costing about $6,000 to replace that. So an asphalt shingle roof on average lasts for 30 years. So if we broke down that cost of $6,000 over 30 years, it comes out to be about $16.67 per month that you'd have to contribute towards the future cost of that roof. This ends up adding up to about 2.5% of your monthly rent. So if you're only budgeting 5%, well then you're discounting the cost of all the other capital expenditures you're gonna have. For instance, you have to consider things like your appliances, your HVAC, water heater, plumbing, electrical, flooring, your driveway. There's so many things you need to consider for your capital expenditures that one day you're gonna need to replace. And so you can imagine that if just your roof alone is already taking up 2.5%, then budgeting 5% for all your capital expenditures becomes really unrealistic on these cheap rental properties. On top of that, the CapEx items end up being about the same cost for the same size house, whether it's a $700 a month rental or a $3,000 a month rental. It makes no difference, but you end up feeling it way more on the cheaper rentals. Now, if you add to that having bad quality tenants because you're in a lower quality area, then you can definitely expect things like longer vacancy periods. You're gonna have more evictions, which will cost you more money out of your pocket. And in addition to that, they're not gonna maintain your house the same way like a higher quality tenant will, at least on average. Now, if you're buying a triplex all in for $24,000 after rehab, and then in addition to that, it only rents for $1,200 total, which is basically $400 a door after the rehab's complete. Well, that sounds like Ryan was probably invested in a pretty low quality neighborhood, even for the cheap market he was investing in. So for me, the first thing I'm not gonna do is invest in one of these pure cash flow plays, because like Ryan said, over the long run, these numbers just don't pan out. Number two, I'm gonna target neighborhoods that are in a C+ to a B- area. And this is gonna give me better tenant quality that I can rely on a regular basis. So for me, even after I rehab the properties, now I'm able to attract top rent, I'm able to get shorter vacancy periods, I'm able to get tenants that can pay on time and that will maintain and take care of the property. So the next thing Ryan talks about is that instead of going for these cash flow plays, you should be targeting these high appreciation markets, because over the long run, that's what's gonna grow your net worth.
And so those are a lot of the reasons I don't like these cash flow markets. What I do like are the appreciation markets. And the appreciation markets are really where you're gonna build net worth.
Now, my opinion on this is that I completely agree with Ryan once again on this. I think he's right on the money, but there is a little bit I disagree with. You see, when you have a high active income and you have a surplus of cash, you can actually afford to have a break-even property or even multiple break-even properties. But when you have an average income, you really need your portfolio to have cash flow as a layer of protection. Now, the reason you wanna have cash flow if you have an average income is because it's going to make it easier for your lender to continue to qualify you so that you continue to buy rental properties and scale your portfolio. Whereas if you're only buying properties in appreciation markets that maybe you're breaking even on cash flow, the problem is it will become harder and harder to qualify for the next rental property each time you buy. So what I like to do is called double dipping. And by double dipping, I'm talking about I'm investing in a market like a Knoxville where I can get my cash flow. And in addition to that, I'm investing in a market like Phoenix where I can get my appreciation so I can get the best best of both worlds. For my cash flow markets, I'm not targeting these pure cash flow plays like Detroit or Cleveland where I'm getting like 0.2% appreciation a year. I'm talking about a market like Knoxville where I can get about 3% appreciation per year long term, but at the same time, I'm still getting my cash flow. Now, in addition to that, I buy houses in my own market in the Phoenix area where my family and I live in them. We turn them into a rental property, but it allows me to put down as little as a 5% down payment. Now, these properties may break even cash flow wise or maybe slightly cash flow, but the real play with this is the appreciation, because over the long run, they're going to make me a lot more money than all my out-of-state rentals because the appreciation in Phoenix is higher than those other cash flow markets. And like Ryan says in his video, these appreciation markets will experience a lot of rent growth as well, and Phoenix in particular has seen a lot of rent growth over time. So although I may not see a ton of cash flow right up front, over the long run it will start to cash flow. And my play for this is that down the road I'll end up selling these houses and eventually turning them into apartment complexes that will provide a lot of cash flow for me. So overall, I really like this strategy I do because it gives you the best of both worlds. You get your cash flow from your cash flow markets, it gives you that protection you need, but at the same time you're getting your massive appreciation with your primary residences that you only technically have to live in it for a year, then you can move out and turn it into a rental property, so you can build your massive wealth over here and you have your protection over here. So overall, I really agree with Ryan in many aspects of his video. I do think that appreciation is really the way to go, and that's what's really going to build your net worth over the long run. However, if you're making an average income like many people do, I think you maybe want to have some cash flow in there to protect you, to help you continue to qualify for more properties, and that will be the way to help you scale your portfolio. So it's really on an individual basis. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you gained some value from it, do me a favor and smash that like button. And also, if you haven't been to this channel before, definitely subscribe and hit that notification bell to check out more content like this. Also, be sure to comment down below and I'll do my best to reply to you guys. Lastly, follow me on Instagram at The Out of State Investor. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.